Good morning, everybody. Hello and welcome. We've had a 6-minute hiatus right there. I'm terribly sorry about the slightly later start, the 6-minute delay. But we're here now. There were some slight technical issues. It's a Sunday morning. I'm very sorry about that. It's just classic Sunday morning confusion. But here I am. We're live. I'm here. You're there. There's some of you watching, which is great. Tells me that there's currently 6 of you watching this, so that's good. Now, because it's live, you get to ask questions, and I get to answer them. Hello, somebody said. Well, Owen, Chris, one of you. Hello. Sorry about the delay, guys. I just was getting confused with events and lives and anyway. We're here. It's good. Everything is just as it's supposed to be, I think. Apart from my hair is substantially longer. Good morning, Dua. Hello there. Good to know there's someone else there as well. My hair is substantially longer than the last time you saw me. I think the last time I was talking to you, my fiance had just had a little baby. We just had a little baby. She was about a week old back then, I think. So now she's 5 months old. The hair's maybe not greyer, just longer. The crow's feet are a little deeper. The sleep is a little less. But all is well. Anyway, that's not what you're here to listen about. Morning, Richard. Morning, Ralph. Good to see there's a few of you in there. So, right. I think we're going to crack on, okay? So, I am going to start at the top. Let's get a screen up here. Let's share this so you can see. Let me put myself up here. Hello there. And now, hopefully, all is perfect. So travel photography, guys. Right. We are coming towards the end of lockdown. And that means that hopefully everything going in the right direction. We should be able to get out and spend a bit more time out and about. We should be able to do some more traveling again, get back on a plane or a boat or in a camper van. And go see some more of this wonderful wide world. And so, because that's what's coming up soon, that's on the horizon, the spectre of being able to travel a bit more, we thought it'd be a good chance to have a chat about travel photography, give you some hints and tips and some advice and maybe a bit of inspiration to get out there, answer some questions you may have. Really just kind of have a little look around the world and maybe get some inspiration of where to go next. So I've been very fortunate. I have done a fair amount of travel. I'm up to about 64 countries now. So I've seen a fair bit of the world, but it feels like a drop in the ocean because there is so much out there to go and see and photograph that actually I'm moving into a truck next in probably about 2 months' time with my wife and daughter and dog, and we're going to go drive around the world for some years because there's still so much of it to see. Anyway, I digress. So travel photography, okay, I'm sure many of you when you go traveling love to take your camera with you, love to take pictures, capture the places that you go see, and hopefully by the end of this you'll be able to do it maybe a little more confidently, that you're getting the shots that you want. So we're going to start by talking about what is travel photography, because in my mind travel photography is basically the broadest brushstroke of photography. When people say to me, what do you do? I say I'm an everything photographer, because that's pretty much what I am. It might be landscapes, portraits, commercial, corporate, sports, action, wildlife, macro, products. It could be all sorts of things. But actually, if I was to say I'm a travel photographer, that kind of covers most of it. It doesn't really do the corporate commercially stuff, but pretty much everything else seems to, in my mind, fall within the scope of travel photography. Because when you travel, there are so many things to see, there are so many things to photograph, that it really doesn't kind of wrap itself nicely into one particular thing. Morning, Kumar. There we go. Good comments, questions are working. So, is travel photography beautiful pictures of famous places? This is the Forbidden City in Beijing. And this is, I was very fortunate with this picture. One, because it was so mirror calm. Two, because the sky was blue. If you've ever been to Beijing, you may know that it's often very smoggy, but seemingly I've been to Beijing a few times now. Every time I go, I seem to coincide it with the Olympic Committee or some other international committee turning up, which means all the factories get shut down a few days in advance, so all the air gets clear and you end up with blue skies. So is travel photography something like this? Great architecture, kind of a bit of a landscapey type thing, maybe a picture postcard of a location. Or is it wildlife? In your mind, does travel photography incorporate wildlife? Is it going on safari, seeing things like this, a pair of wild cheetahs sitting no more than a couple of feet away from you, just passing the time of day, looking for their next prey? Or is it a classic landscape? I started with an architectural landscape, but maybe a classic landscape, beautiful sunrise in Mallorca, wave splash. You've got something that's going to make people want to go to that location, to go and see that scene for themselves, perhaps. Maybe that's it for you. Maybe you're all about the landscapes when you travel. Or is it the people? Is it the people that we meet? Because frankly, this world is a big place of beautiful locations, but the people are just as important, just as interesting, just as intriguing, and just as worth photographing. So maybe it's the people that you're really interested in, the people that you want to photograph. In this case, one of my favourite ever pictures of people while travelling. This is in Vietnam, and I was riding along on my bike. I'd borrowed a little beat-up old bike to go cycle along the Mekong Delta for an afternoon and evening. And on the bike, I was quite tall. I could oversee a hedge, and as I went past a hedge, I saw this scene. Woman sitting on the chair, husband hanging out in the hammock, just chilling. And I stopped, got off the bike, walked in, held the camera up, smiled. I don't speak Vietnamese. Took a few pictures, and this was my favourite. Afterwards, as soon as I finished taking the pictures, the lady actually got up off her chair, picked up what I could only really describe as a spear. It was basically a long pole with a big knife on it, and I thought I had to beat a hasty retreat, but she disappeared around the back, and came back 2 minutes later with a massive fruit that she'd cut off a tree, and then chopped it up and offered it to me. Experiences like that are things you only get when you travel. I imagine you walking into, I don't know, you walk into someone's garden in a big city, London, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, wherever it might be, in the UK, you walk into their front garden and start taking pictures, they're probably not going to serve you fruit straight afterwards. So, you know, it's nourishing for the soul to be able to see other parts of the world and to meet other people. Or maybe alternatively, it's about your mode of transport. It's about a bit of action. This was sailing across the Atlantic a couple of years ago. This is somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. And it's about telling a bit of that story of what the travel is, what's going on, where you're going. A bit of the, you know, there's a bit of motion in this. There's that kind of dynamism of movement and sailing and stuff happening. A little bit more than just a boat in the ocean. Or perhaps it really is more storytelling. Maybe you're more of the photojournalist persuasion. You want to do more documentary type photography. This, again, in Beijing. This is watching the flag lowering ceremony in Tiananmen Square. So every morning and every evening, the flag goes up and then comes back down again. They have a whole ceremony for it. And people take pictures. They all crowd around. That square is rammed every morning and every evening to watch the flag go up and then watch it come down again. And thousands of people try and take pictures of it. So maybe you want to tell that story. You're trying to, you know, social commentary, mobile phones perhaps, or perhaps it's just explaining to people who haven't been there what goes on in Tiananmen Square. Finally, maybe it's just, you know, some kind of travel brochure type picture. And this is what I mean. Travel photography is such a broad brushstroke that really we can break it down in so many ways to so many different things. And that's kind of what we're going to do. I'm going to pull maybe not all of these, but most of these apart. I'll give you some hints and tips about each of them, and we can, answer questions. I'll give you some advice on some kit as well. And in fact, that's kind of where we're going next. Because when you've got such a broad brushstroke, when there is so many different types of photography, how do you pack for that? Now, I'm notoriously bad for packing the kitchen sink. I like to carry everything with me. I never want to get on location and feel like I don't have something absolutely crucial with me. So I do tend to take a lot of kit. But from a camera perspective, there are, I mean, the best camera is always the one that is with you. And so that might be a compact camera. It might be something like an SX60 or a PowerShot G7X Mark III, or it might be your DSLR or your mirrorless camera. So maybe you're I don't know, maybe you're a 850D user, or you're an EOS R user, or an R6 user. The camera actually is kind of less important in this case, because if you're doing landscapes, you're probably going to want something maybe full frame. If you're more about the wildlife, then perhaps you're going to want something with a smaller frame, an APS-C. So the camera is arguably less important, but still, nevertheless, it pays to pick a camera that, one, you're comfortable with, that you know how it works. And that's true of any camera. You need to know all of the settings, you need to be familiar with it. But really where it's at is in lenses, okay? Because the lenses are what affect how you see the world, okay? And the general guide, I'll give you some general guide lenses. The general guide is that we try and find lenses that encompass a wide range, because unless you're like me and you want to carry a massive bag everywhere you go, and believe me, it's great if you're just going out taking pictures on your own, carry a big bag by all means, but when you're traveling with your family, my other half has a phrase for it. She calls it tech faff, because I carry a massive bag, lots of cameras, lots of lenses, and I'm forever changing things around, which in some ways is great, but in other ways it means I'm missing what's going on, or potentially missing what's going on. So having a lens that's perhaps a bit of a hyper zoom can be a real benefit. The great thing is, though, whatever lens you want, obviously there are a massive number of Canon lenses available. Many different lenses now since the start of the EOS system. I think we're over 100 million lenses made, and every focal length you could possibly want. But just to kind of pull out a couple of them, and I've got them kind of within three ranges here. If you are an EFM user, so let's say you are using I don't know, an M5 or an M6 Mark II, both of which are actually really great cameras in their own right, but also make brilliant second cameras, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Then you perhaps want a fairly wide zoom range. An 18 to 150, for example, the lens on the left at the bottom, would make a great travel lens, or does make a great travel lens, because it gives you everything from a wide angle, it's kind of like a 28 equivalent at the wide end, through to a fairly long telephoto, something that's going to give you a reasonable bit of reach, maybe not enough quite for wildlife, but certainly great for candid portraits. Or maybe you go with the documentary style, and I've not put all the lenses on here, but a 32mm, the little tiny 32mm gives you a really lovely kind of 50-ish mil focal length, lovely standard. You could equally replace that with the 22mm. The 22mm lens, EFM 22mm, is about 35mm, so a kind of a real documentary style lens. And they don't take up a lot of space in the bag. It's the great thing about these mirrorless cameras, particularly the APS-C mirrorless cameras from Canon, as I say, the M5 and the M6 Mark II. They're small, they're compact, you get interchangeable lenses, and they don't weigh you down. If we move along now to more DSLRs, then arguably you could say that something like a 28-300 is a really great travel lens. It encompasses everything. Now, personally for me, a lens like the 28-300, while it's incredibly useful and incredibly versatile, I personally would rather choose two different lenses. And I said that something like the M5 or the M6 Mark II are great cameras in their own right, but also great second cameras. If I'm carrying a DSLR, or as I do now, an EOS R or R5, I also carry a small mirrorless. So let's say, in my case, it was an M5, and then I have moved on to the M6 Mark II. It gives me the ability to use my EF lenses that I'm carrying with an adapter, and thereby have two cameras that don't take up an awful lot of space. So 28-300 perhaps is a really good solution for DSLR if you want a one lens solution. Or if we start looking at the R system, then within the RF range we've got this 24-240, and personally I think that is probably the ultimate all-in-one travel lens right now. You've got 10 times optical zoom range. We have got obviously everything from a wide angle through to a pretty good telephoto lens. It will cover most of your landscape needs, obviously not the very widest, but I shoot most of my landscapes on 24 anyway, so it's wide enough for that. And as I say, if you want to do your candid portraiture, a little bit of wildlife perhaps, maybe not quite long enough, but at a bit of a push. If you want to isolate sections in a landscape as well, which I'll talk about in a little while, then that 24-240 I think is a really cracking single lens travel solution in the guise of keeping things light and not having to carry 15 different lenses with you like I do sometimes. Okay, so that's a bit of the kit. As I say, there is no right answer as to what to take. The camera you've got, and then as I say, generally probably something that is a bit of a hyper zoom that gives you a good focal range within one lens. Unless you're shooting professionally, something all-in-one is probably going to give a big benefit to you. So location finding. Now when you're traveling, location finding is something that takes a bit of practice and skill and a bit of planning in advance. It's all well and good to turn up on location and think, get to a country on holiday and think, hey, I'm going to take some pictures. But it really pays to spend a bit of time researching, spend time on the internet, have a Google. There are various apps that you can use that will give you ideas of different locations. Even just look at the travel brochures and see if you can start working out where some of the pictures that you see of those places are taken from, and then you can start plotting them on a map. And then as you start doing this more and more in advance, you can plan your holiday destinations to go to the places to photograph the things you want to do. And you can hide it under the guise to your other half that you're going on a nice holiday somewhere for them to go sit on a beach or whatever, go look around a market or whatever it is they may want to do. So that planning in advance has lots of benefits. In this case, as I say, it's more about finding great locations. Sometimes though, you'll find locations once you're there. You won't be able to see everything. Obviously, not everywhere's been photographed, thankfully. There's still unknown places for us to find. And location finding is about opening your eyes and being aware of the situation. So, here is somewhere at a place called Mono Lake. This is a very kind of classic style landscape other than it's vertical. And this is not a particularly great picture. Okay, it's a picture as an example. It's here to give you an example of what you might see and then what the picture might actually be. So if you turn up and you've got in your head the idea that you're going to shoot a classic style landscape picture, this might be what you get and what you come away with. Okay, it's Mono Lake on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevadas. Now that's all well and good, but there is another picture here. And when you get on location, travel photography, as with any photography, is about exploring the opportunities that you have open to you. So while this is not a bad picture, it's not great, this is the same location, it's a much stronger image. It's about opening your mind to say, well, I was coming here to photograph a landscape, but really the landscape doesn't work in the traditional sense. So how about we go for a longer lens, we isolate and we look more instead at some kind of silhouette. A much stronger image results. If I go back, if I showed you this and then this, which one do you prefer? And it's come from actually exploring a location. And that's where actually going back to locations can be a real benefit, because you may not see this at the time you're there. And I'm a big fan of revisiting locations. I'm a big fan of kind of staying where I am. If I'm somewhere that I think is nice, I think there's opportunity there, I don't run on to the next place. So I think maybe a good tip at this point is to say, don't always be in a massive rush to run on to the next thing and the next thing on your trip. If you've got a location that you think is going to bear fruit, it really pays to take the time to explore that location to its fullest and see what you can come up with. Because most of the time, the first picture you see won't be the best picture. There will be other pictures there that you can explore. So good reminder. Thanks, guys. Yes, any questions, do just fire them in the comments down here. Okay, so this is kind of the opposite end. I'd seen pictures of this location. This is Port Said in Mallorca. I'd seen pictures of this location. I was aware that it was somewhere I wanted to go visit. Fortunately, my fiance is very amenable to this. She doesn't really take pictures, but she likes seeing pretty places that I take her to. So we had a big old hike up this hill to get to this spot. And as I say, I'd seen the pictures, and then it was a question of getting the map out and trying to figure out where they were taken from. And if you look at Google Maps, you can look at the terrain, you can look at satellite view, so you can figure out what your view may be and where exactly you need to get to be able to capture the picture that you want to create. So in terms of your location finding, maps are really beneficial. Looking online to see what other people have done, what other pictures come from that location is also really beneficial. So maybe have a look at like Instagram, super convenient. Search on Instagram for pictures of that location and see what other people have come up with. And then finally, a lot of it is just keeping your eyes open. So this was taken in Taiwan. This is in a place called Jindian, just outside Taipei. And I'd seen a similar sort of picture to this, of this location from a slightly different place. And I'd seen it, and I couldn't remember where I'd seen it, but I couldn't work out where it was either. And I spent, what did I spend? I spent the best part of a month driving around Taiwan on my own, taking pictures of the country. And incidentally, Taiwan, spectacularly beautiful country, highly recommend visiting should you ever get the chance. Anyway, the whole time I was trying to figure out where this was because I wanted to go and take a picture of it. I thought it had potential as a location. And driving all over Taiwan, I didn't see it anywhere. And then, just as I was driving back in Taipei after having been all the way down the south of the island, I actually drove round this on-ramp. And as I went round, I kind of went, oh, that might be the location I was looking for. And so then again, I had to sit down with a map and try and figure out exactly where it was. It was the location I'd been looking for, and then I'd figure out how I could get there, which required a bit of a scramble and walking through some homeless people camps and whatever. But I got to the spot that I wanted, and it was because I'd seen a picture of the memory, and I had then spent the time to go and look it up on a map. I also use drop pins. If those of you that use Google Maps, I drop pin places that I see that I think I might want to come back to. Or if it's a photo location that I've used, I'll drop pin it, maybe make a little note about it, so that I've always got this collection of locations that I can revisit perhaps on a trip or before I get on a trip. Put the pins in, and then if you're struggling to think, oh, what shall I go and do today? You can have a quick look and go, well, okay, around here, these are the pins that I've made in advance of getting where I'm going. It's also about finding great light. So we're actually still in Taiwan, and this is in a temple in Taipei. And it's a temple that I've been to many times now, probably 8 or 10 different times, because there are pockets of beautiful light. And photography is all about light. It's all about finding that great light, using it creatively, and trying to find beautiful pictures because of it. So I will... a good question, Dua. I will answer that in just a moment. So this temple, for example, as I say, there are some spots I know I can go and stand in nice and quietly and just sit and watch and wait and see people come in. They come in, they pray, and then they move on. But you can wait for something interesting, like this guy to come and stand just in a shaft of light where the background is dark. So he really stands out. Now, Dua, how do I pack when there's a 7-kilo hand baggage allowance per person? Great question. With difficulty. There's a bit of a trick to this. So you can kind of try and chance your arm. So I normally take a roller bag. I have a Manfrotto roller bag, and it doesn't really look like a camera bag. It looks more like one of those, just like an ordinary roll-on suitcase. So the advantage to that is that when you get to check-in, if it just looks like it's not an overstuffed camera bag, they tend to just kind of ignore it. It's probably just got a laptop and some clothes in there, and they're not overly fussed. If they do want to weigh it, and I have had this, the way around it is well, simple really. Take stuff out of it, because if the kit is not in your bag, if you're carrying it in pockets or on your shoulder, then it doesn't count as part of your weight limit. So it's the only time I'll recommend these, but some kind of photographer's jacket or a jacket with a lot of pockets. If you're, a Paramo user, then something like a Paramo, Pajero or Halcon jacket with loads of pockets in it is really useful, because you can take stuff out of your bag, stuff it in the pockets, your bag gets under your 7 kilos, and then you walk on the plane, pack everything back in your bag and put it back in the overhead locker. So it's a bit of a cheat. But so far, and we'll see what happens as we come out of lockdown if they've decided to become more stringent, but that's always worked for me in the past. The other one actually is if they say, oh sorry sir, your bag is too heavy, or madam, your bag's too heavy, it's got to go into the hold, say okay, I'll do that. What shall I do with my laptop? And they'll say, oh no, definitely take your laptop out. You can't put your laptop in the hold, because that is going to be, our insurance won't cover it. If it gets broken, then it's not going to be covered. So you'll say, okay, fine, can I take the laptop out? Take the laptop out and then say, what shall I do with pick a number, however many £1,000 worth of camera kit as well? Will that be covered on the insurance in the hold? 9 times out of 10, they'll say, no, sir, that won't be covered either. You best take that bag on the plane. So there's kind of a long answer. But there's a couple of different methods, a couple of different solutions to getting around that 7 kilo hand luggage allowance. Okay, so let's talk landscapes. Now, landscapes, doesn't matter if it's landscapes in a foreign country or landscapes in the country you live in. Landscapes are landscapes, fundamentally. So how do we approach landscapes? How do we approach landscape photography? Well, as I say, part of it is that location finding. Part of it is about maybe trying to tell a story or give some sense of scale. So these two images taken probably 12 years apart or so, maybe a bit more. The one on the left is in New Zealand. It's the Mirror Lake, Lake Matheson. And it feels like it's upside down because I decided to compose it that way up, so the reflection was the mountain. But it's got the plain. There's that little plain, which gives a real sense of scale as to just how big this landscape is. And equally on the right, you've got this road that seems to stretch into infinity. This is Death Valley. And it's kind of running up into the mountains at the back of Death Valley from Stovepipe Wells. And by including that road, you've got something that we know what the size of it is, and then the scale of the insurance. Insurance. I've just read insurance from Dewar. Sorry about that. Right, the scale of the landscape around it. Now, the point about these two pictures is they're not your classic landscapes. They're not your wide angles. And the point that I really want to get across to you is don't always think that every landscape is a wide angle shot. It's not. You'll often find when you're traveling that something like a 100 to 400 or the 100 to 500 or the 55 to 250 makes a great landscape lens because it allows you to really isolate. And in this case, in both cases, compress that perspective. So make things appear flatter than they really are, which makes, for example, Mount Cook look like it's stacked on top of the lit bank in the foreground. So think long lenses, not always wide lenses. Again, this is actually a long lens, and it's about telling the scale of the location. In this case, I'm trying to tell the story of these people that live at the base of this massive mountain in Norway, in front of a fjord. You've got the beautiful greens and that kind of almost like a raw sash pattern of reflection, but that huge mountain going up out the back. So again, you're looking more at a long lens. This is a 70 to 200mm focal length lens. And when you're traveling, you should always, wherever possible, be open to things that... Okay? And I'll probably say this again later on, but one of the best bits of advice I ever heard about travel photography was if you see it, take the picture there and then. Don't think, I'll come back to it later. Because if you think you're going to come back to it later, you never will. And if it's caught your eye, the reason it's caught your eye is because there's something about it. The light is great, or you've seen a potential picture, or there's some composition you've foreseen, whatever it might be. take that picture there and then. If you do come back to it later in better light, then great, so be it. But at least you've got something already. So don't put off thinking, I'll come back to it tomorrow because the light might be a little bit nicer. If it's caught your eye, there is a reason it has caught your eye. And that's what happened here. I was driving actually to somewhere else in Norway, and I drove alongside this fjord, and I saw this reflection, and I ended up spending about 3 or 4 hours walking up and down the shoreline there, just capturing different reflection pictures as I went. Okay, Kumar says, apart from the cards themselves, do I carry any secondary storage for images when I'm travelling, like a portable hard drive, and any recommendations? Yes, I do. I always carry a laptop with me, and I use, let me find one, there's one just here, one of these. So this is a SanDisk Extreme Pro. I've got the version 2s now. SSD, it's a 2 terabyte. Hang on, let's get that in focus, shall we? Where's the light? There it is. Put it next to my face and then it'll be in focus. It's a 2 terabyte SSD, USB-C. That's nice and fast, and they're super thin. They're nice and drop proof. You can bash them, you can drop them. They're fairly weather sealed. It's a good way to keep your pictures safe, and I do recommend definitely backing up as you go. Now, in terms of memory cards, I use quite large memory cards, and I'm just looking around for one now. Can I find one? Here we go. Good example. So 128 gig. Can you see that? Yes, you can. Or maybe you can't quite. Here we go. 128 gig. Let's see if I can make it focus. Come on, focus. Focus. There. Oh, nearly. No. Come on. There it is. 128 gig. So I tend to use quite large memory cards. And some people are scared of large memory cards, but there's a reason for it. The reason I use the large memory cards is that while I'm unlikely to fill them each day, I tend to start shooting, and at the end of each day I'll create a new folder. So each day's pictures are within a folder on the card. So if I take the camera, go into the yellow menu, go to record card folder, func select, I can generate a new folder. That then means that each day's pictures are in one folder, and when I get to download them later, I can download them and they're already kind of sorted. So when I'm looking through much later, I've got the ability to know which day it was taken on without having to sort through 2,000 pictures. I can just sort through the pictures from each particular day. So in my suggestion there, Kumar, was, you know, I use a SanDisk hard drive. There are many others available. Richard said, now I've moved to the Canon R system, do I find the need to travel with a tripod? Yes, I definitely do. I still travel with a tripod, mostly because I like really quite long exposures a lot of the time when I'm doing landscapes. And as great as the R system is, and I have handheld half a second on a 15 to 35mm lens, it will go down to that. But if I want to do a 30-second or something longer exposure for a landscape, then I still need a tripod. So I will always travel with a tripod. And there are two main tripods that I travel with. One is my ever-present Gitzo tripod. So I take a GT4553S, which packs up actually reasonably small, but it's not light, but it's solid, and that's super important for me. It's got to be strong. Or I have a Manfrotto B3 GT. B3 GT it is, which is a very small, packs up this big, really nice and compact little tripod, and very, very light. Kind of like 500-600 grams, but also actually reasonably strong. And that's, if I'm being super lightweight, that's the tripod I'll take. If I'm going lighter than that, then it's probably a Joby Gorilla Pod. But yes, I will still take a tripod with me, despite the fact that the R system, particularly R5 and R6, have such good IBIS. Okay, still more long lens landscapes. This is the Dead Sea in Israel. And this kind of goes more towards that storytelling side of things. It's a bit of an abstract landscape. But what you can see here is how the level of the Dead Sea is receding. So there's kind of an environmental conservation story to this. The fact that the Dead Sea is evaporating rapidly, and the water level is gradually being sucked back and back and back, and you're ending up with these bigger and bigger, I'm going to call them beaches, but not. but only really visible with a long lens. You wouldn't really get the effect of it in a wide angle shot. So that long lens in your bag is really super convenient. I suppose I should put a wide angle in there as well, so just because. So this is 24mm. Now, those of you that know my landscape work will know I am a massive fan of a 24mm tilt and shift lens. It is pretty much pretty much my go-to wide-angle lens for landscapes. But really, anything like a 16-35, a 15-35, 10-22, any of those make a really good wide-angle option. I just use tilt and shift because I like the shift function. I find it suits the way that I shoot and how I want my pictures to look. So from a landscape perspective, your lens choices are kind of a wide angle and a telephoto. You probably don't need too much in the middle. You know, a 24-105, while a good walk around lens is probably not going to do an awful lot for your landscapes. But a 15-35, a 10-22 combined with something like a 100-400 is going to give you every kind of landscape option you might want. Okay, and then in fact, well, a little tip about this. This is the Great Wall of China. If you want to get scenes where you don't have people in them, then you need to either wait until everyone's gone, which can be really hard, or you need to come up with alternate solutions. So in this case, I actually hid in a guard tower. I hid in a guard tower on the Great Wall of China. I waited for everyone to go home, all the guards to go home, and then I had the Great Wall of China to myself. But on other occasions when I've been there, and I've not been able to do that when it's been really busy, then that's when you find that some kind of ND filter, a solid ND, is incredibly useful. So maybe it's a 10 or 15 stop or 16 stop ND filter. Do a really, really, really long exposure, and hopefully, because people tend not to stand still for long periods of time, as they move around, they just become blurry and disappear. They become like ghosts in your picture. And hopefully, if you can get a long enough shutter speed, you get it almost entirely clean. So yeah, it's either patience and hiding out, or it is use a filter, a long exposure filter to make people disappear. Okay, people. Now maybe, as I say, photography, travel photography for you is all about the people that you see. And this is much harder for you to plan because you don't quite know what you're going to see. And so it's a lot more like street photography. You need to be reactive to the situation. You need to keep your eyes open. You need to be aware of what's going on around you. And so that's what this was. This is in New Orleans. I was out walking one evening with my camera, having a look to see what I could capture. And as I walked past this lady sweeping her steps, the lighting caught my eye. It was so beautifully cinematic. And this is just the light that was there. It looks like a film set, or that maybe I created this lighting, but genuinely I didn't. I turned, I took one frame, which is this shot, and I carried on walking. And you know, they're the kind of things that actually it takes practice, and you have to have your eyes open. And it takes a while to get into that mindset of being able to see things and respond quickly. But it's often where the magic can happen when you're photographing people, because you can't often get them to do it again or go back to where they are. It's a candid portrait. It's an authentic view of that scene at that moment in time. Similar again, actually, it's back streets of Beijing, and this little boy just appeared as I walked past. He appeared straight out this gate, obviously wondering what the giant white guy was doing, walking down some very dingy back alley, and came and stood there. And actually, just about a moment later, an identical twin dressed identically turned up next to him. So I ended up actually spending quite a long time standing photographing these two little boys. Questions just come in. Kumar, have I ever been robbed of my camera and or equipment while travelling? No. I've had 3 attempted robberies. 2 of them were in the UK. One of them was in Portugal, but nobody's ever succeeded. The 2 in the UK or one was a very long time ago in Nottingham, and one was in London. And in Portugal, yeah, two guys kind of approached me. They walked right through the middle of my picture, actually, so I was already annoyed at them. But they came and stood either side of me as I was kneeling down for a low-angle architectural shot. And they stood either side of me, and it was fairly obvious what was going to happen. And somehow I managed to get my way out of it. So it's obviously something you have to be aware of, and something you need to be careful about. But I think a lot of it comes down to confidence. If you look nervous, then people will take advantage of it. If you look confident and like you belong there, then I think it tends to go quite a long way. It also, from my perspective, it's a really hard question to answer because I'm 6'4", and people generally don't want to pick on people my size. And if you're carrying a tripod, you've got a very useful weapon anyway. So 6'4" and a big stick is not something people tend to be willing to have a go at. So Joao, if I'm shooting people, do I tend to ask for permission? It very much depends on the situation. Really depends on the situation. If it's very obvious, like I showed you the couple sitting outside, I don't speak Vietnamese, but when I walked into their front garden, I kind of held up the camera and pointed and smiled and sort of shrugged like, is this okay? And it seemed to be fine. It's a good idea to let people know what you're doing if you're going for, if you want them to be looking at the camera or be very obviously in the picture that they're aware you're photographing them. But a lot of the time it can be moments that are such a grab that you don't even get a chance. So I think, like this little boy here, I wouldn't have asked him. I took the picture and then his twin appeared and then his mum appeared. And again, I don't speak Chinese, so I couldn't have asked anyway, and I doubt he'd have known what I was saying. So I took a bundle of pictures, but when his mum arrived and she saw I was taking pictures too, she was quite happy with it. And actually what I carry now, I'm just looking for it now, I often carry like a small printer, like a Canon QX10. It's a really good way. If you've taken pictures of somebody, you can do a quick print for them. And a QX10 prints, little prints about this big. A Canon selfie printer does it as well. They're dye-sub type printers, battery powered, take up very little space in the bag. And if you give someone a print afterwards, then they tend to feel really quite happy about it. So I think that's a really nice way of also giving something back if you've taken a picture. It's a nice thing to do. So street scenes, it kind of goes back to looking for the light. This lady cooking food on a kind of a street barbecue. Position myself for it to be backlit, so there's nice dark behind the smoke as the sun comes through, so it really stands out. It actually acts like a bit of a reflector, pushes some light back into her face because she's backlit. And it's about being open to great light. The biggest thing about all photography, but really useful for travel photography, is that you keep your eyes open for great light. Every time you see great light, you want to be looking for things to make use of it, okay? And you can train yourself to see great light, to be aware of it. Look at lots of pictures and look at the lighting, break down where the light's coming from, and you'll see what sort of light you naturally gravitate towards. And then it will make it easier for you to go and look for that kind of light. So I do like quite contrasty backlight, side light. I find it really interesting. It doesn't mean you don't use light coming over your shoulder or light falling directly on a subject, but you're aware of different lighting situations that could make for strong, interesting pictures. And then we've got, something a little bit more organised. There's no light in this. This was crossing the Atlantic, just some great scenes, beautiful colours, the blues. In this case, it was the blues that gave the cold feel or the high key feel that really made it stand out to me. And they look almost like fashion shots, but they're not. They're travel images shot while sailing of us sailing, basically. And again, it's about the light, looking for that light, maybe looking for complementary colours or colours that work together. All really good skills that you need to practice and hone. Again, lovely light. We're in, where are we now? We're in Vietnam. And just, watching this old guy, really interesting face. People, incidentally, back to Joao's question, do you ask permission? People will tell you, if you point a camera at them and they don't want you to take a picture of them, they will tend to let you know. So don't worry about that too much. This guy didn't mind at all. He saw me taking pictures of him, absolutely didn't mind at all. Was quite happy going about his business. And here, I'm looking for that lovely light. We've got the reflection kicking off the water, and you can see where it's just catching the light in his eye, giving him that catch light. And I've got so many pictures of this scene where he doesn't have light, where he's moving or whatever, the reflection hasn't quite caught his eye. So when you get back home and you're looking through your pictures, it's about finding that one that stands out, the one that gives you that bit of depth or intrigue, or where the light just works just right. And also, don't forget to photograph details. So, there might not be a nice wide scene, a nice portrait, but this is kind of a storytelling portrait. You've got these old guys playing dominoes. You've got the wrinkled hands. There's so much story and life in those hands. You can see what they're doing, and it's about telling a much larger story than just concentrating on somebody's face or where they are. And thinking about, when you get back, what do you want? Do you just want a nice headshot portrait, or do you want a collection of pictures that are a bit more documentary in style? So looking out for these little details with a longer lens, something like a 135 f2 or a 70-200, really helps expand your storytelling opportunities in your travel photography. Travel modes. And action. Don't think it's all about the destination. Think about how you're getting there. So this is from that yacht going across the Atlantic. One of them we're at anchor. One of them we're not at anchor. Neither of these are from a drone. They're both me at the top of the mast. And yes, I can tell you that when you're at the top of a 33-foot mast, it moves quite significantly as the boat rocks. So not for those of you with vertigo. But it's, again, coming up with ideas that make for different pictures. I was sitting on the boat and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to get a picture from the top of the mast? And then figuring out how to go about doing that. And then on the right, figuring out how to go about doing that while we're at sea, under sail, rocking quite significantly. So don't forget your modes of transport as well. Don't think it's all about the destination. The journey is just as important. It's an old saying, but the journey is just as important as the destination. It could be, we're in New Orleans. Yes, New Orleans. Again, modes of transport. The streetcars in New Orleans are an integral part of that city and its history. So getting pictures of those, even in the low light at night with, shallow depth of field and all of this kind of leading line going on, is very important. Or maybe you're in a camper van. This is a camper van in New Zealand. I spent a month driving around South Island of New Zealand, and I had this very cool camper van painted like the Gary Larson Far Side characters. And so thinking more about not the landscape per se, but we've got the star trails, you've got the southern pole star Polaris, everything appears to be rotating around that, a bit of light painting going on. So don't always, as I say, think it's just the location you're at, but what have you got, what are you doing there that you can bring to those pictures? Can you create something a little bit different to what everyone else is going to do? And if you photograph always the same spots that everyone else does, at some point you're going to just end up with the same pictures. So trying to find other things is really key, really useful skill, really important. Okay. Keeping your eyes open. Now, I've mentioned this a few times, and being open to different picture-taking opportunities when you're traveling is really crucial. If you go with the sole intention that you're going to photograph landscapes, you are missing so many other pictures that you could be taking. Equally, if you think you're only going to photograph the people that you see, or you're only going to photograph the architecture that you see. And this is why I say that travel is such a broad brushstroke, because when you travel, and let's be honest, we are all going to be out of the habit of this when we start traveling again. But when you travel, the more you start seeing, the more you do open your eyes to other opportunities. And it's also important looking at other people's pictures because it gives you ideas, different things that you can focus on. So kind of a short series of, there's only 3 here, but it's part of a bigger series of things in New Orleans that I saw one day. I was walking around New Orleans and I was looking for things to photograph just to see, you know, whatever caught my eye, and ended up with a little series of walls. Now this may sound quite dull, but if you put them together as a series, it goes to the point of being aware of your surroundings. So a lot of the walls in New Orleans, walls and doors, are quite brightly coloured. These are all shot the same way. They're all shot with the EF 50mm f1.8 STM, the nifty 50. Great lens to throw in a bag, great travel lens because it weighs nothing, takes up no space, and gives really good image quality. So I'm walking around, and as I say, I see these walls and doors that are all brightly coloured, and I thought, that makes kind of an interesting sort of pattern. So I photographed the first one. And gradually, as I was walking around more and more of them started catching my eye. My eyes kind of tuned in to these scenes. And by photographing only with a fixed 50mm lens, I had a very standard field of view. I could photograph them all in the same way to create this kind of interesting little series. So keeping your eyes open is really super important, and being open to different kinds of photo taking opportunity. Tony says, do I shoot RAW and JPEG, thinking of printing as you go in memory space? I don't shoot RAW and JPEG, I just shoot straight RAW. If you're shooting RAW and JPEG, then you are indeed expanding the amount of storage space that you need. And unless you have a particular reason for the JPEG, I wouldn't bother with it. I'd just go with straight RAW. Now, if you're on a camera that's got Wi-Fi built in, so most of the more recent cameras have got some kind of Wi-Fi connection, even if you've shot in RAW, you can still download that RAW file to your computer, or sorry, to your phone or tablet, because it will download a JPEG file. It won't download the RAW file. So if you're worried about getting pictures you can share quickly, still shoot in RAW, use the Wi-Fi function on the camera, download it to the that would be Canon Connect, the Canon Connect app. It will pull a JPEG down, and then you are able to share it there and then as you go. So I don't see a benefit in RAW and JPEG, and that means obviously when you get back, you've still got the RAW file for making the print as you wish. Dua says, sorry, just reading. Dua makes a good point. Yes, if you don't want to carry a laptop, there are some external storage devices that don't require a laptop. You just plug the card in, hit go, and it will download to it. So, in fact, he says, reaching into his box of tricks just below the desk. It's a little bit dusty. One of these. This is a Western Digital My Passport. Come on, My Passport wireless SSD. So there's an SSD drive in here. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got an SD card slot here, and it's also got USB in, so you can plug in an external card reader. And all you do is turn it on, plug card reader in, or plug a card in, hit copy, and it will transfer everything off the card down onto your drive. And these come in various capacities. I think this one's, can't remember if this is a 1 or 2 terabyte one now. But if you don't want to use a laptop, then something like that, or something like Dua said, really very convenient. Joao, instead of the 50, if you use the 85, will you have similar results? You'll get similar results, it'll just be slightly narrower. You'll need to basically stand back a couple of paces to get the same sort of result. Your field of view effectively is narrower. That's all the difference you're going to have. So standing back, it's the great thing about a prime lens is you have to zoom with your feet, which is a really great thing to practice. Not just relying on a zoom lens to get the shot you want, but moving in and out to create the field of view that you're looking for, to capture what you want in the scene. So similar, but slightly narrower from the same position, or take two, 3 steps back, and then you'd get much the same sort of result. And then something a little different, there are always pictures to be taken. Now, some people love in-camera movement, other people hate in-camera movement. It's really much like Marmite. This was taken in Morocco quite a few years ago. It was in the market in Marrakesh. There was some beautiful, what were they? Drapes, shawls, scarves, something like that, hanging. They themselves didn't make for a particularly interesting picture. The light wasn't great, but I thought, well, I wonder what would happen if I used a slow shutter speed and just panned vertically down them. And lo and behold, you end up with this kind of colour wash. Now, as I say, you may love it, you may hate it. But some people will like it, and I've sold this print. This sits on quite a few people's walls in various places because some people do like it. And as I say, the light wasn't amazing. The shawls themselves hanging, I couldn't see an interesting picture from them as they were. But by taking the opportunity, by thinking a little bit outside the box, you still come away with a picture that, you know, it's digital. It doesn't matter if you delete it afterwards, but you might just end up with something that you like and that other people like. Okay, so this kind of goes to what I was saying earlier on about always taking the opportunity when it presents itself. Obviously, a rainbow isn't going to reappear in the same spot, so I just happened to be driving along and I saw this rainbow arcing around behind this temple in Taiwan, and you know, it was like, well, there's something interesting there. Let me stop and explore. So I found somewhere to pull up, got out, and started wandering around trying to find a particular location where I could get the rainbow directly behind the monastery, but obviously in front of the mountain where it really stands out as opposed to against the sky. So taking that opportunity there and then when I saw it, and the same on the right. This was from my hotel room in Las Vegas. Had a nice balcony, and decided that it was, you know, it's not necessarily the nicest. It could be more interesting, better light. But I was only in that hotel for one night, so I may as well go back. Ah, guys, I'm very sorry. Tony, well spotted. I didn't come back. Here's the scarves ICM shot. Sorry, and we'll come back to Tony Kumar. My fault entirely. There we go. Look, we're all back. We're back. We're back in the room. Okay, so ICM scarves shot. Okay, so we're all caught up with that one. Entirely my fault. Too many buttons going on. So yes, you know, slow shutter speed in this case, pan the camera, come up with something a little bit different. And then here we go. Now you've got the image on the left, Taiwan, with the rainbow. And then on the right hand side, that Vegas view from my balcony. Yeah, from my balcony. And it was like, well, the light's not amazing. It's kind of soft, but there's a bit of pastel tone going in there. But I'm only here for this one night, so there's definitely a picture to be had. Let's get that picture. And you know, if I ever find my way back to that hotel room again, maybe I'll do something better. I'll get better light. But in the meantime, there is a result from it that in itself is not the most unpleasant of pictures. Okay, animals. We're kind of running out of time, but we're moving on. So maybe maybe travel is animals for you. Don't be scared and thinking that wildlife photography is all about super long lenses, because it's not. You can tell stories with wider lenses. This is a 70-200. We've got this lion in the long grass. We're not concentrating on a portrait, frame-filling portrait of the lion. We're more interested in looking at where the lion lives, on the savannah, in the Masai Mara, poking his head over the long grass, having a little look, checking out what's going on, before slumping back down to sleep a bit more. So you can incorporate wildlife as part of your travel photography, and it doesn't, as I say, have to be a super long lens. Though, if you're on the RF system, the 600 f11 or 800 f11 are not very big, don't weigh an awful lot of money, and could be taken, certainly the 600 could be carried as a kind of a just-in-case sort of lens, although it might be a bit of overkill. Here, you know, if you want to do wildlife, then lenses like the 100-400, 100-500 are going to be your key allies when travelling. If you want to reduce your kit size down, they give a lot of focal length in reasonably compact portable packages that will be useful for very many other things. This is a humpback whale tail in the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. Alexander, if you were wanting to get professional lenses, which ones are good to get doing a wide range of photography? Well, if you want a wide range of photography, you probably need a wide angle, so that might be a 16-35 equivalent. You might want a standard kind of focal length lens, so that could be a 24-105, and then a 70-200, and that would probably cover you for most things. And then if you wanted to get a little bit longer, then that would be because you do wildlife or sports or action, and you want something like a 100-400 or 100-500. There's no like right answer to that. It will kind of depend. You say a range of photography, in which case you need a range of focal length lenses. But as you start moving to a particular area of photography or things that particularly catch your eye, you can start narrowing down what sort of focal length lenses you take with you. But if you had a focal range from kind of 16mm to 200mm, you're covered for many things, most things probably. In terms of your wildlife, and this goes, it's not just travel photography, but all photography, look for the less obvious picture. So the previous picture, this one is the obvious whale picture, humpback whale tail up against the mountains. The less obvious picture is the humpback that looks like a mountain stacked against the mountains behind. A little bit of mist hanging in the air. Just a different style of picture. So don't be afraid to try something different, to look for a different style of picture. Personally, this is out of those two pictures, in fact, out of all my whale pictures, this is probably my favourite one because it's not the one everyone would normally go for. So be open, I guess. Try things. Try different types of pictures out. And as I say, think about telling your story. So these are muskox in Norway at -15, it was cold, 18, something like that. Frame filling or semi sort of frame filling portrait, classic portrait on the left of a muskox having a sleep in the snow, versus the wider angle shot that tells a bit more of the story of where the muskoxen live. So thinking around the story, not just going for the obvious picture, will bring you more pictures home and a better story that you can put together as a series rather than just relying on one single image. Okay, we're coming to wrap it up by saying be your own harshest critic. Invariably we are. If you're anything like me, you think all your pictures are terrible and nobody should ever see them because you're always striving to be better. That's not a bad thing, okay? If you are incredibly happy with a picture, you've achieved your nirvana for photography. What have you got to go out and take more pictures of? Because you've got something you're 100% happy with. So be your own harshest critic. And some pictures work, other pictures you think work, but they don't really work without a story. And I'm a big fan of pictures actually being able to stand on their own. So I'm going to show you a picture, which it's a picture that I really like, okay? But it doesn't work, it's not particularly interesting without a backstory to it. And so the point of being your own harshest critic is A, how can you improve your pictures, but B, what do they mean to other people? If you're looking for pictures to put into a competition, picking the pictures that you love is not necessarily the best way to go about it. You want to be picking pictures that other people are going to find appealing as well. And if it requires a big backstory, it's not going to work. So I'm going to give you the picture for a second. I'm going to have a little sip of water. And hopefully you'll go, well, it's quite a nice picture, but it doesn't mean anything. And this is the point. Travel photography, a lot of the time, in my opinion, there should be some meaning to it. You're trying to tell a story. You're trying to give people a little insight into something. And if it requires too much explanation, it doesn't work. So this little boy, he's on a phone. He's looking up. It's very cute. What you can't see about this is that he's on a place called the Via Dolorosa in Old Jerusalem, in Israel. And because Via Dolorosa is one of the Stations of the Cross, so you know it's apparently where Christ walked, carrying his crucifix, yada yada yada, all of that, and it just caught my eye because he looks like he's on the phone having a chat to God because of where it is, but that really doesn't tell any of the story within the picture. It's just a cute picture of a kid, and so you know, I like the picture. It doesn't work as a travel picture, and being my own harshest critic, it could be so much better or more interesting or work better as a picture if the story was more obvious. Okay, Alexander says, the last video you did about back button focus. There we go. I'm glad you got your head around back button focus and it worked out for you. That's good news. Okay, right, and that, as they say, is that. That is the end of our hour. Now there are, I think, some special offers on. I think there are a few special offers on if you've been enticed into potentially buying anything new, or if not, then I hope you've been inspired to get out as and when it is safe and legal to do so, to get travelling once more, and hopefully to approach your travel photography in a different way, to be more open to different kinds of subjects, to be more open to looking for the light, finding those interesting pockets of light, and tackling things that maybe you didn't previously tackle. So, as I say, with all of that said, thank you very much for giving up your Sunday morning and joining me here. I hope it was of interest. I hope you've learnt a few things. And I look forward to seeing you all in person somewhere in the future. Maybe after I've had a haircut, after this ridiculous lockdown hair that you can't see, but there's a hairband holding it back, has been shorn off. Maybe I will see you in store or on a workshop somewhere in the not too distant future. In the meanwhile, please stay safe and well, everyone. Keep shooting, stay creative, keep doing your photography, and I hope to see you all in the not too distant future. Enjoy the rest of your Sundays, everyone. Bye-bye for now.